We often go around and around, and today we'll do it for real. It's better here, better somewhere else. Front. Such super high production values.
You're videoing it.
Oh yeah. So that people around the world can
see you right there.
Yeah. See?
Did you join the screen actors?
Yeah. The union card? No, that's all joyfully old school. We yes.
Do we get residuals?
It depends. If you have a good insight, you get residuals. If it's just another Trump joke, then no, then that's not. The internet's full of them.
White House has them too.
Right. Now see, that's we're way ahead of the curve.
They just suspended visitors to the White House. Yeah.
My invitation hadn't come yet anyway, so mine got lost in the mail a while back. All right, so this is streaming, and we'll find out if it works. I should text to read to see if it works.
How will you know how many people are on?
Yeah, I think it shows up.
You have another big account page.
Right. Oh, it works. Dorit says it works. I didn't have to write it. Thank you. All right. So there we are. So look, here's the deal. Because sometimes especially now, people want to. People have always not wanted to come to shul.
No, Rabbi, that's not.
It may not be nice to say.
But it's true.
Now they've got an even better excuse. So for those who don't want to show up for health reasons, we've got this, which works. Because some of us are in the risk groups and should consider staying home. But in any event, we'll continue as is, and anyone, so wherever you might be, you can do this, and God willing it works. So here's the deal. There's if you're streaming in, see there it is. The throws me off to here. There's a trigger warning for all this stuff, which is to say there's a lot that's offensive. That's why I can't click the for children button on the video thing. It's not for children. It's everything's offensive, and don't freak out. You got to roll with it. So anyway, we are in 2 Kings chapter 14, and we're up to, help me out here.
Verse 15.
Verse 15, is that right? Okay. Oh yeah, thank you. That's bracha for Torah study is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Good. Is there anything else we have to cover before we start? I feel like the answer is no. 2 Kings chapter 14, beginning verse 15, 14 really. Like this is Yoash. Yoash. This is the story of Yoash, king of Israel, and that's not to confuse with Yoash, king of Judah. These are two guys, same time, kings of neighboring kingdoms, same first name, but one less longer than the other. That's just to make sure that we're confused. Yoash king. We should back up. Verse 13. Yoash king of Israel called Amitzah son of Yoash son of Ahaziah king of Judah, in Beit Shemesh, and he came to Jerusalem and breached the walls of Jerusalem for the gate, from the gate of Ephraim as far as the corner gate, 400 cubits. He took all the gold and silver and all the vessels that were found in the house of the Lord and the treasuries of the house of the king and all the hostages, and he went back to Samaria. So this is the king of Israel, like, gets through the walls of Jerusalem, and here, like, again, like, takes the plunder that's there, takes the gold, both from the same word in Hebrew, bait, right, for temple and for palace and for house. You just know from context. If it's God's house, that's the Beit HaMikdash. That's God's bait. The bait could mean palace, which is, or it could be a regular house. So here he takes it from both God's house and from the king's house.
You said all the hostages?
Yeah, that's how he translates. As he translates that.
Vessels which mean slaves.
So treasuries of the house and the all the vessels that were found in the house of the Lord and the treasuries of the house of the king and the hostages. Right, that's how Alter translates in JPS.
So they had slaves.
Slaves. He translates
It said vessels.
vessels. No, hostage children.
Yeah, carrying off the gold and silver.
There's a very involved note.
A very involved note. Let's hear it.
It was common for kings to have children of senior officers stay at their courts in a sort of hostage arrangement to ensure the loyalty of their influential fathers. Jehoash brought them to Samaria. According to Seder Olam, Joash died shortly after returning to Samaria, and Amaziah escaped back to Jerusalem.
They kept the kids aside.
So right. Wow. So the essence of that, to repeat, I think more loudly for those who can't hear you, the keeping the children of higher level officers in the palace nearby, essentially as hostages, in order to ensure their loyalty. No, not a word out of you.
I'll give you an example.
Right. So, how do you ensure that somebody doesn't double cross you? You hold something up there. So, not a noble practice, perhaps. That's what I'm in the process of looking up. לקח את כל הזהב והכסף ואת כל כליו, all the gold and all the silver and all the vessels הנמצאים בבית Hashem that were in God's house, ובאוצרות בית המלך, and the treasuries of the king's house, ואת בני תערובות ישב שומרון. I'm not familiar. B'nai Tavrut. Now, B'nai can sometimes mean children, but also like B'nai Yisrael doesn't mean children of Israel in the sense of age in any sense. It means like those, like you're in the category of. So you could say children, or it could just be slaves or servants or hostages or somebody who's captured there. Like whether or not ArtSchool's note is right or not, I don't know. That it has a sense of a later explanation to me, but which isn't to say that can't be true. Anyway, the king of Israel here is seizes Jerusalem, or the treasures of Jerusalem and Judah, and schleps them back to the Israelite capital in Shomron, in Samaria. 15, and the rest of the acts of Joash that he did, and his valor with which he battled against Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Acts of the Kings of Israel? Again, like the essential, all of the day-to-day doings, and even the important doings of the kings are not the interests of the Book of Kings. The Book of Kings has a theological focus. All of the other stuff, wars, taxes, successes, failures, building projects, that's in a different book. We don't have that book. But the author refers you to it. Verse 16, and Joash lay with his fathers and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, which again, for a king of Israel, not a bad end, right? So Yoash is king. Now, if you look at the beginning of chapter 14, he was 25 years old when he became king, and 29 years was he king in Jerusalem. That's a super long reign. Keep your eyes set. I think by the end of today, you'll see people with significantly shorter reigns than 29 years. So 29 years in the king of Israel, not a bad thing. Back half of 16. And Yerovam, his son, became king in his stead. Now, Yerovam, this is Yerovam 2. Like some kings always have they're like movies. There's a Roman numeral after it often, or Super Bowls. So this is Yerovam 2. The original one was the first king of Israel that put him on this bad path that the biblical author keeps saying that they continued in the path of Yerovam, son of Nevat, and worshiped in the wrong places, things like this. So this is a different one, same name though, much later, hundreds of years later, right? And Yerovam his son became king in his stead, and Amaziah, son of Yoash, king of Judah, lived 15 years after the death of Yoash, son of Yoahaz, king of Israel, right? So we're out of the same names at the same time issue. Verse 18, and the rest of the acts of Amaziah, they're not written in the book of the acts of the kings of Judah. Again, that book we don't have, but they'll refer to it. Verse 19, and they hatched a plot against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, and they sent after him Lachish, and they sent after him to Lachish and put him to death there. So there's a plot against him. It succeeds. We know nothing about it other than the fact that it happens.
Scribal error.
So they presumably the reputation is presumably a scribal error, right? So sometimes, like in copying the book, like they would just copy the same line twice because everything, of course, is done by hand. Ditography is the term for this, when you just accidentally write the same thing twice. So when that makes it into the official versions, as it were, which or Jews is the Masoretic text, it remains. So here, reading Robert Alter's translation, he leaves it in, and he probably notes that it's likely a scribal error because the same phrase repeats twice with no conceivable reason why. So his note here, once again, no reason is given for the determination of the conspirators, presumably people in the royal court, to kill the king. One possibility would be the simmering resentment over his rash military provocation of the northern kingdom and its disastrous results, the breaching of the wall, the emptying of the royal and temple treasuries. As with the assassination of Amaziah's father, hostility is directed against the king, not the dynasty, for his son is allowed to ascend the throne, right? So remember that before, the last time there was a conspiracy and assassination of the king of Judah. Again, it was against the king for presumably misrule, but the dynasty stays in place. In Judah, they never are knocking the family of King David off the throne, or they're knocking somebody from the family of King David off the throne, but not the family itself. In Israel, in the northern kingdom, the families keep changing because there's always because the revolutions put new dynasties on the throne. Not true in the south. But again, no details, which again, just not the interest of the biblical author. Whatever their issue was, not important to us, or not important to him, as it were. Verse 20. And they bore him off on horses, and he was buried in Jerusalem with his fathers in the city of David. Right, so he's still given a full burial, as it were. He just didn't die a natural death. And all the people of Judah took Azariah when he was 16 years old, and they made him a king in Amaziah, his father's stead. He it was who built Elath and settled it for Judah after the king lay with his fathers. So, building projects.
You don't usually get building projects.
Yeah. So, not all of them. Like how they choose what to include, what not to include. That we can't say. That's sort of hard to.
Would that be a clue as to why the father was deposed because he wasn't in favor?
It could be. I mean, again, more likely is the fact that he started a war and got crushed in it. Like that's again, as I mentioned this last time. Like if you don't have a system of removing your leader, you're in trouble, right? The only way to get rid of a king is to Kill him. To get rid of the king, you got to get rid of the king.
And yet you're not supposed to kill a king.
And yet you're not supposed to kill a king. So this is, this is why modern forms of government have other ways to try and deal with removing a leader. You invent a virus, I think, is the. All right, that one's on me. Right, like God forbid. Right, so I mean that's why you have to have like systems to replace a leader if the leader is deemed deemed unfit or whatever it might be, because otherwise you end up with this, where the only way to get rid of him is to kill him. So verse 22, yeah. De lot. So it's not a bad thing as far as projects go. He builds a lot, which we should go visit someday. Verse 23. In the 15th year of Amaziah, son of Yoash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, son of Yoash, became king over Israel and Samaria for 41 years. So 41 years. For a king of Israel, that's a super long time. And yet, and he did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not swerve from all the offenses of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Not him, but the first king of Israel, who had led Israel to offend, right? Like, so this is part of the issue that the biblical author will often have. Like, he always wants to attribute good actions to good behavior and misfortune to bad behavior, right? So if somebody does the wrong thing and gets killed, then it fits into his worldview really well. Here, though, like you have a situation where somebody lives a long life and rules for a long time and is doing the wrong thing. That's tougher to unpack.
It's not so much that they do the wrong thing; it's that they offend the Lord.
Right. Well, for him, you're in a modern sensibility where right and wrong has a primarily moral valence to it. Correct. In the biblical world, right and wrong, there's no distinction between ritual and moral. They're wrapped up together, and or we would call ritual and moral. Like,
So if you're stealing from your neighbor, or you're stealing from the temple, two different things, right, Rabbi?
but both serious offenses. Like, one's not, you're not getting a lesser sentence for one than for the other. And on some level, it's a degree of loyalty. Again, like to do what God doesn't want you to do is what we would call treasonous, right? This is not okay.
Are we to assume that the primary offense is still worshiping in the wrong place?
Yes. Here it seems worshiping the wrong place. And at the very least, in the southern kingdom, they're worshiping the wrong place. In the northern kingdom, it's that plus having other gods into the mix. So in the northern kingdom, it seems there's a other gods into the mix aspect that's there. 25. He it was who brought back the territory of Israel from Lebo Hamath to the Arva Sea, according to the word of the Lord God of Israel, which he spoke through his servant Yonah, son of Amitai the prophet, who was from God Hefer. So 41 years, you got to do something right? The guys who are incompetent get knocked off, right? So notice he's expanding the territory of Israel, seemingly significantly. And that's the right thing to do because he's listening to a prophet who gets one single mention here, but is famous elsewhere, right? And that's Robert Alter's note here, though. I'd like to know the Art Scroll note on that. Alter's note. Does the Art Scroll give a note for this?
It says he is the prophet for whom the book of Jonah is named. The prophecy referred to here is not recorded in Scripture.
Right. So Art Scroll, following traditional view, says that Yonah, son of Amittai, this is the book of Yonah. This is the main character of it. The protagonist of the book of Jonah is Jonah ben Amittai. Robert Altus noticed the name of this prophet, about whom nothing is known beyond the mention of his prophecy here, is then picked up by a writer of the Second Commonwealth period for the central figure of the narrative book of Jonah. So you see the gap between the traditional perspective and the secular scholarly perspective. One assumes it's the same guy. The other says that the book of Jonah is a later creation and that somebody's just using this character sort of as the vehicle to tell that story, but that story is created several centuries down the road. Make sense? Makes
So
sense.
is the Jonah in the book of Jonah, is he Ben Amittai?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So Jonah in the book of Jonah is Jonah ben Amittai. So traditionally same guy. As most scholars say that the book of Jonah is written later and not concurrent with this point in history. So not uncommon, like that people would would write a book and use a earlier character sort of as a leaping off point. It's not. It was thought to have been an acceptable thing to do. They're not trying to fool anybody. It's just the way they rolled. So Yonah makes an appearance, sort of. We know that Jonah in the book of Jonah isn't hanging around happy to give prophecies. The Jonah in the book of Jonah is running away from giving prophecies and sort of like unhappily doing it and having great sympathy for strange plants. Verse 26, for the Lord had seen the very bitter affliction of Israel, and there was no ruler or helper, and none aiding Israel, right? Like, so that's language that's more common to the book of Judges, right? Like where like things are going wrong, and you want some sort of a miraculous deliverer to come and bail you out. Kira Hashem et onei Israel mora ma'od ve'efes otzer ve'efes azuv ve'en ozer Yisrael. Right? Like there's there wasn't anyone around to help. And the Lord had not spoken to wipe out the name of Israel from under the heavens, but he rescued them by the hand of Yerovam, son of Joash. Notice this is his explanation. Why does Yerovam have so much success? God is helping him. Does that mean that Yerovam was a good person? No. Does that mean he was doing the right thing? No. Why is God helping him then? Out of the goodness of God's heart, as it were, right? Sort of like, Israel doesn't deserve all these terrible things to happen to them, so I won't destroy them completely. I could. I would be justified in doing so, but I won't, right? So that's that line there, right? Sort of the explanation. Why does this guy get to rule for 40 years? God doesn't want to wipe out the name of Israel from under the heavens, even if we could. This is just kindness. And the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, and all that he did, and his valor with which he battled and brought back Damascus and Hamath to Judah and Israel, are they not written in the book of the Acts of Kings of Israel? And Jeroboam lay with his fathers, with the kings of Israel, and Zechariah, his son, became king in his stead. Now, what's weird about that?
With all the things he did wrong, he still got buried with his forefathers, which is typically a good thing.
Right, typically a good thing. Long life, long reign, also a good thing.
I didn't understand what God wants you to do. Not after reading these 5 or 6 verses.
Wash your hands. Right. So, I mean, this is so among other things, so the facts of the world are that good things don't always happen to good people, and good things always have good people, bad things don't have bad people, like sort of like prosperity and illness, etc., are doled out randomly, more or less, right?
God is an equal opportunity vendor.
The lineage is maintained.
Yes.
Seems a little odd.
His son remains. So sometimes yes, sometimes no. You'll following in chapter 15, things the stability won't last. So
We covered Damascus. When did we have Damascus before?
right. So that's another good note from Robert Alter on that. Brought back to Damascus. The verb here is an extravagant flourish. For Damascus had not once been a possession of Israel, but is realistically indicated as some military success against the kingdom of Aram. So, like, brought back Damascus likely doesn't mean what it says, which has some sort of sense of capturing and occupying. Again, so I don't think there's any capturing and occupying ever of Damascus. It's always, as it were, outside of the territory of Israel. So it must mean like a victory in battle against Damascus, not the actual occupying of. So that the that. Yeah, so that there is unlikely to be something that we can take literally. It just seems to be that he had successes militarily, not that he literally occupied Damascus. They never really got that. But Art Scroll says,
Aram, including Damascus and Hamath, had originally been captured and administered by David. 2 Samuel chapters 8 and 10, but subsequently freed itself. Jeroboam's army recaptured it and returned it to Judah.
2 Samuel chapters 8 and 10. That the
2 Samuel chapters 8 and 10, no verses.
And David, so 2 Samuel chapter 8 from the very beginning, verse 4, and David captured from him 1,700 horsemen, 20,000 foot soldiers, and David hamstrung all the chariot horses, leaving aside 100 of them, and the Arameans of Damascus came to aid Hadadezzer, king of Zobah, and David struck down 22,000 men from the Arameans. And David set a prefect in Aram, Damascus, and the Arameans became tribute-bearing vassals to David. The Lord made David victorious wherever he went, etc., etc. So there you have David, the implication of David occupying Damascus. And in chapter 10 of 2 Samuel, right. So the implication is that David occupies Damascus, and then which would bear out this reference at the end of 2 Kings 14:28, brought back Damascus to Judah in Israel. Though remember, Jeroboam is not in Judah; he's the king of Israel. Which again makes it sort of hard to understand exactly what's going on. In any event, military success after a time of not having. 799. What I'm looking at, page 799. This is chapter 15. Chapter 15 of 2 Kings. Watch what happens here again. Watch for timely notes. The 27th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Azariah, son of Amaziah, became king of Judah. 16 years old he was when he became king. In 52 years he was king in Jerusalem, which is a long time.
The next.
And his mother's name was Jeholiah from Jerusalem. And what he did was right in the eyes of the Lord, all that Amaziah, his father, had done. The high places were not removed. The people were still sacrificing and burning incense on the high places, which is standard throughout this entire period Nobody really takes them away, which again seems to indicate that while the biblical author hates them, the people and the leadership and the Kohanim all seem to be okay with it. Both the political and the religious leadership seems okay with it, but the biblical author very much not so. Verse 5, and the Lord infected the king, and he was stricken with skin blemish till his dying day, and he dwelled in the quarantine house. And Yotam, the king's son, was appointed over the palace, judging the people of the land. So, skin blemish, which tza'arat, again, in the Hebrew, leprosy in Art Scroll and probably in JPS as well, translates leprosy. Same thing, some sort of, not literal leprosy, but like some sort of skin disease that causes white splotches. So there are a couple of things here. One, notice long reign, and generally good in the eyes of the biblical author, but still allowing the high places, allowing other places to worship, which is not good. And if somebody has what they see as a contagious disease, what do they do with them? Quarantine.
Again, 52-year reign. Now all of a sudden, because he had this disease, they're attributing it to the fact that he didn't do it.
So why did you let it go on for so long?
Yeah, well, exactly. It seems like every time somebody does, it got attributed to something.
Right. Well, so that's, I mean, on some level,
Somebody does, it got attributed to something.
right. Well, so that's, I mean, on some level, that's the problem with, that's among the problems of that theology. Meaning that if one wants to say good thing, God will reward the good and punish the bad, the problem with that is that's simply not the way the world works. And you can say that when the world seems to work that way, like, see, he deserved it. God gave him that, blah, 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 blah. But you know, next week, the opposite's going to happen, and it's not going to be. So the only way you can maintain that theology is to occasionally like put in little exceptions, like at the end of the last chapter, where it's like, well, he deserved worse, but God had mercy on the people, and so worse didn't happen, right? Or you're just really selective in how you apply it, right? But that's part of why it's a theology that like doesn't really work, and I think everyone always knew that. It's almost like a hope that the world would work differently. Like I feel like sometimes I read these almost as prayers that that'd be better if the good were rewarded and the bad were punished. But like the world doesn't work that way, and it's just not. It's just not a useful theology. People always come up to me and say things like, everything happens for a reason, or it's all for our best, or all for the best, or God is in charge. And depending on the situation, I'll politely nod, but because if it works for them, it works for them. You know, I don't have a direct line to God telling me how the universe works, but I don't see it working that way, and I feel like yeah. So that. Right. So Robert Alto's note on the skin blanch. No reason is given for this terrible affliction. Azariah is said to have done what was right in the eyes of the Lord, apart from allowing worship on the high places to continue, as all his predecessors had done. One may conclude that we have here the report of historical data, that Azariah suffered from disfiguring skin disease, presumed to be contagious, all his life. The fact that God is said to have done the afflicting simply reflects the general assumption that this and other biblical writers, that all things are caused by God. If it happened, it's because God caused it to happen. Like there's no.
And sometimes we can't reason why.
And sometimes we can't reason why. Also his translating note on quarantine house. The Hebrew name of this place appears to reflect the term that means free. It is a free house, either because of the condition of freedom is associated is one ugaritic text with death, here in living death, or because someone in such a place is free of all civic obligations. So what do we got there? 15:5. The Nagasham he Metzora ad Yom Moto, and he was a Metzora until his dying day. Veshev Aved Havshit, Peda Havshit, the free house, which is the term for the quarantine house, or it could be, I don't surprise, it could be a every so often the biblical writer will use the opposite term for something bad, right? So the free house is for somebody who is not free. Anyway, that's the quarantine. Either way, he's in quarantine, which is how you deal with infectious diseases that you don't know how to control. What can I say? It's not irrelevant. And Yotam the king's son was appointed over the palace, judging the people of the land. So
even though he ruled for all those years, he really didn't.
Right. Right. So then that's his notes. So he's not truly in charge because he can't be truly in charge, and his son is. So usually the older person is regent for the younger. Here it's something of the opposite, right? Again, why you need a system where you can switch rulers, even if somebody's too sick to rule or incompetent, things like that.
So he ruled for a long time because nobody knocked him off because he wasn't doing anything.
He wasn't a threat. Correct. Most kings of Judah die a natural death. There were a couple who don't, but most die a natural death, as it were. But yeah, there's no need to knock him off because he's stuck where he is. And Azariah lay with his fathers, and they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Yotam the son became king in his stead. Right. So again, burial in Jerusalem in Ir David. Verse 8. In the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, right? Like the main way you're going to date years is by the king in the opposite kingdom. Here, Azariah obviously is there for a long time. In the 30th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Zechariah, son of Yerovam, became king of Israel for 6 months. 6 months, not a long reign. Standard explanation: he did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his forefathers had done. This is like Control V when you just copy and paste, or just pasting the sound. He did not swerve from the offense of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who had led Israel to offend. That's said about virtually every king of Israel in the exact same words. And Shulam, son of Yavesh, hatched a plot against him and struck him down in the presence of the people and put him to death. And he became king in his stead. So 6 months and a violent death. And the rest of the acts of Zechariah, are they not written in the book of the acts of the kings of Israel? No, again, there's only 6 months worth of acts to record. 12, this was the word of the Lord that he spoke to Yehu, saying, a 4th generation of yours shall sit on the throne of Israel. Remember, Yehu, for doing the right thing, quote unquote, which was taking instruction from Elisha, leading a military coup, killing off the king of Israel, descended from Ahab and Jezebel, who you want to get rid of, and then the king of Judah as well, as a reward for that, and then killing off Jezebel herself. As a reward for that, he gets at least 4 generations of his children that will sit on the throne, meaning that the dynasty won't be taken away. Doesn't mean they're going to live to ripe old age. Yehu lived, I think, was 29 years king, right? So doesn't mean they're going to live to a ripe old age, but at least his generations will sit on the throne. So 4th generation of yours shall sit on the throne of Israel, and so it was. Shalom, son of Yavesh, had become king in the 39th year of Uzzah, king of Judah. And he was king in Samaria for a month. Yes. So 52 years is a especially long time. A month is especially short. It's not the shorter than Basha, I think, in the earlier days of the king of Israel, was king for a week. But Israel, not a stable country, especially compared to Judah. He was king for a month. Altars know that the northern king, by this point in history, in the 8th century BCE, exhibits extreme political instability. Monarch after monarch is assassinated as coup follows coup. The Deuteronomistic editor makes some attempt to provide a theological explanation for these upheavals. This was the word of the Lord they spoke to Yehu, but he cannot encompass all the rapid changes in this way. There's no reason given for the fact that Shalom reigns only a month before he's murdered by Menachem. So, a month. We were noting before that of the long reigns sort of without explanation. Here we have exceedingly short reigns without necessarily sufficient explanation. 14, and Menahem son of Gadi came from Tirzah and came to Samaria and struck down Shalom son of Yabesh and put him to death and became king in his stead. And the rest of the acts of Shalom and the plot he hatched, why they are written in the books of the acts of the kings of Israel. Then did Menahem strike Tapua and everything in it in his territories of Tirzah, for it had not yielded, and he struck it, and its pregnant women he ripped apart.
Definitely not PG.
Definitely not PG. This is not the first time we've had references like that of that specific practice. So Shalom, he's written in the books of the kings of Israel, which presumably not that much, but that's Kilopatach v'yech et kol haruteya bikea, and tore apart, ripped apart, and his pregnant woman he ripped apart. Like this seems to be part of how they dealt with conquered territories, and presumably the author is noting it because it's thought to be pretty grim, even for the time. In the 39th year, the 39th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Menahem son of Gadi became king over Israel and Samaria for 10 years, which is not a bad run when you're replacing somebody who was there for a month, who was replacing somebody who was there for 6 months. And say it with me. He did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not swerve all his days from the offense of Yeroboam son of Nebat, who had led Israel to offend. Every time the same phrase. Pul, king of Assyria, came against the land, and Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, so his hand would be with him to make the kingdom firm in his hand. He pays tribute for presumably for foreign help in helping maintain his rule.
Sorry, I gotta go back.
Yeah.
Shalom.
Yeah.
He got murdered. It doesn't say he slept with his fathers. Everybody else has been.
Everyone else sleeps with their fathers.
And this one
He
just-
doesn't. Zachariah, same. The 6-month predecessor, same. Right? He doesn't. He seems to not get it either. And there's no sense that these guys are any worse than the people who do get that phrase attached to them, right? The Yeroboam doesn't seem to be a great guy. He lay with his fathers. So some guys get it, some guys don't. It's not entirely clear. Like the reasoning on it isn't entirely clear.
Do we have a king count here anywhere?
In the back of there are in the back of the art scroll that's there, and that one has it also. And I think in the back of the Jewish Study Bible they have we should have a king count somewhere.
Monarchy starting with Saul and ending with David.
Yeah.
Yep.
So and it doesn't. So in Judah, there should be fewer than in Israel, right? Rulers. Here, Israel. So the united monarchy is Saul, David, Solomon, right? Divided monarchy. And we're looking for a count, literal count we could do. We can do both. And Judah, Rehoboam, Abijam, Asa, Jehoshaphat, Yerovam, 5, Ahaziah, Athaliah, Joash, Amitah, Azariah, 10. I think that puts us at 10 for this point in time for Judah, Israel, Yerovam, Nadav, Abasha, Elah, Zimri, Omri, Ahab, Ahaziah, Yoram, Yehu, Ahaz, Joash, Yerovam II, Zachariah, Nahum. So I got 15 to 10 for at this point in time, meaning that Judah's had that from the split in 928 to this point in time, which is about, by this count, 747, Judah's had 10 kings, and Israel's had 15. So it's from 928 to 733, so about 200 years. So 10 to 15. So it's not like it's not the widest lead in delegates, but like but you know, all you need is a lead. So yeah, stable. It's not perfectly stable because every so often these guys get wiped out, but more stable, certainly. Yeah, so the Jewish Studies Bible, they have a little table in the way back. Verse 20, chapter 15. And Menahem exacted the silver from Israel from all the prosperous men and gave to the king of Assyria 50 shekels of silver from each man. Right, so paying tribute to the neighboring stronger kingdoms, kingdom of Syria, by directly taxing the prosperous men of Israel, which is one could get you knocked off. One strategy, right? Notice here, unlike this is this morning in the Torah when we read of taking taxes from all of Israel, and there are different ways of approaching it, right? There are times when they tax everyone with a flat tax. Everyone pays a half shekel, no matter what, everyone's paying equally. Here, notice he's not doing a flat tax, everyone pays equally. He's going to the wealthy and hitting them higher tax rate, right? So millionaires and billionaires. The 50 shekels of silver from the wealthy. And the king of Assyria turned back and did not stay there in the land. And the rest of the acts of Menahem and all he did, are they not written in the book of the acts of the kings of Israel? And Menahem lay with his fathers. And Pekahiah, his son, became king in his stead. Right? So just the fact of the tribute and being propped up by neighboring kingdoms, that's what we're told about him. In the 50th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekahiah, son of Menahem, became king over Israel and Samaria for 2 years. And he did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not swerve from the offense of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who led Israel to offend. Same thing. And Pekah, son of Amaliah, his officer, hatched a plot against him and struck him down in the king's house with Argob and Aryeh. And with him were 50 men of the Gileadites. And he put him to death and became king in his stead. And the rest of the acts of Pekahiah and all they did, while they are written in the books of the acts of the kings of Israel. Another one who didn't sleep with his father. There's another one who falls in a military coup. This is maybe keeping your officer's sons hostage in the palace isn't the best way to build loyalty. I don't know. But this is relatively common, right? That's how Yehu sees the throne. In Israel, the dynasty keeps changing. Often the head of the army will seize power. He notes on Alter's note here on Agrob and Arya, these mystifying names have variously been interpreted as names of architectural structures within the palace, towns from which the killers came, and personal names. So, like, that's one of those. What that means isn't entirely clear. How that's being run. What the JSB take on that is. We can check.
The fact that these two things, that full passage was conspicuously left out.
And sleeping with their fathers.
Yeah, are we drawing conclusions from that?
Well, it seems to be an implication that things aren't good. But more than that, we don't know. More than that, we don't know.
Which is not an omission.
It's probably not an omission. It's probably on purpose that you do something that you're doing something wrong. So all this is instability. Now, notice we are towards the end of chapter 15. The kingdom of Israel isn't going to last through chapter 17. So all this stuff, like from where we're sitting, it just sort of feels like a list of names and a list of coups and things like this. But it's building up to the fact that when the kingdom's going to fall,
So we must be in the 800s.
About 7:35.
about 7:35. So
we are.
is it that close? So look, yes, about 7:35. That's when when he takes the throne. It's JPS puts him at 7:35.
So the next, we got to go through 2 chapters to go 13 years.
Correct. Well, because the moment is coming, and notice how it's almost like the accumulated weight of sins. Because that line that we got here today of like, it's not that they deserved everything to go well, but God was merciful. God was kind to them. God loved them so much He didn't want to wipe them out, so He like stayed the hand of the offending armies. But at some point in time, that patience is going to run out, or they're going to draw too much from the fund of that love. The love of David isn't going to run out, or it'll run out in the sense that the kingdom will be destroyed, but like not entirely. That will be the theology of it. But we're heading towards the end, and all of this is sort of like meant to, like, you feel it building. Like you're reading this, you're like, how much longer can this go on? And the answer is, not much longer. All right. Adkan, we'll pick up next week as we careen towards the end of the kingdom of Israel, and we'll pick up there. Sir.
Question. King Ida set off the incense and the labor stance. What are they?
Those are the things that you read about in Parshiot, like last week and the week before, and next week and the following week. It's ways that they worshipped in the temple, like all of these sort of boring Torah portions at the end of Exodus and Leviticus. It wasn't just animal sacrifice. There were daily incense offerings and washings and libations offered. So there are different things going. Like even in this morning's Torah portion, there was a command that the children of Aaron wash their hands every day or they'll die, which felt very sort of like on point to me.
But have to sing happy birthday.
Yeah. It did not. That here it's always references that they're doing it in the wrong place. It's not just sacrifices, it's the whole structure of the service. All right, we'll see you soon enough.
Public schools are closing apparently next week.
Oh, really? That's the latest.